Good afternoon, family and parents and students of PGCPS. We want to welcome you tonight to our last Wellness Wednesday session for parents. The topic tonight is social media and mental health. And we want to encourage parents to sit tonight with your families and with your students as you receive information around how social media can impact a student's mental health. And so before we begin, I wanted to read just a quick snippet of something that I reviewed today as it related to the impacts of social media and mental health. And what I read was this. It says, human beings are social creatures. And I received this from helpguide.org. And it says, we need the companionship of others to thrive in life, and the strength of our connections has a huge impact on our mental health and our happiness. Being socially connected to others can ease stress, anxiety, and depression. It can boost our self-worth, provide comfort and joy, prevent loneliness, and even add years to your life. Now, on the flip side, it says lacking strong social connections can pose a serious risk to your mental and emotional health. Lastly, what I want to note is in today's world, many of us rely on social media platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, YouTube, Instagram, and other platforms to find and connect with each other. While each has its benefits, it's important to remember that social media can never be a replacement for real human connection. And so I will open up with that for you to ponder. I will introduce Emily Pasco, our mental health coordinator for Prince George's County Public Schools, and I will turn it over to her to lead the rest of the presentation and tonight's discussion. Thank you for joining us. There will be an opportunity for questions at the end of the session. You will receive information from a panel, and I turn it over to Emily.
Thank you so much, Dr. Faison. I'm excited to be here today and facilitate this important discussion. This came about from parent input. We really wanted to know what topics parents wanted to hear about in supporting their students and their children's mental health. So we know that social media is very deeply ingrained into the lives of our youth and our lives as well as adults. So we are excited to facilitate this presentation and the discussion through the question and answer. So just to kind of review a little bit about what tonight will look like, I'll give a brief presentation on mental health in general, social media, and how the two kind of connect and correlate. And then we also have Ms. Robertson from our IT department, who will talk about safety and other aspects, other practical things that we can do to keep our students safe and healthy online. And then we will have a Q&A panel discussion involving our student voices as well. So I'm very excited to have the different perspectives and to have different input on this very important topic. Before I forget, actually, like I said, we do really value your input. Really informs a lot of the decisions that we make, what we talk about through in these discussions, what we try to get out in terms of informational resources. So I do have surveys that I'll link in the chat, and I'm also going to link these at the end, but I find it helpful, to put them at the beginning so you can maybe click and open it, but then fill it out at the end. And again, I'll put them in the chat again, but just so you might have it open and available for when it ends. We really do value your attendance today, and we want to hear your thoughts as well. So thank you for completing those once we're finished. But let's get started. So share my screen here. Hoping everyone can see that okay. Okay. So thank you to our Board of Education for supporting this for Wellness Wednesdays in general and supporting this topic discussion. We do have interpretation available, so I will turn it over to the interpretation department, those individuals, to give you instructions on how to access that. So the objectives tonight, we have a few. So we really want to inform you all about the various social media platforms. I'm sure you all are very knowledgeable, so that piece will be pretty brief. We're going to talk about the correlation between social media and mental health challenges, strategies to reduce social media use, and how to access PGCPS and community-based mental health services as needed. And we also have an expert panel for questions and answers at the end. And this all aligns with Prince George's County Public Schools strategic framework. One of the main goals is to increase awareness of mental health and wellness and linkages to learning by eliminating stigmas, increasing access to support, and decreasing the number of avoidable adverse educational outcomes. So we all know that mental health is incredibly important. It's getting a lot of focus in the media and nationwide, and it is a big concern for our students. So we really want to support that and help our students improve mental health, which is why we're all here today. So what is mental health? Unfortunately, a lot of us still, when we hear mental health, our minds immediately go to mental illness, and that's just not always the case. So this includes any type of emotional, psychological, and social well-being, and it exists on a spectrum. So we can be excelling and thriving and doing really well, or we might be going through something where we're having a particularly difficult time and need to use those coping skills, but can kind of get by. Or individuals can be in crisis during which they need significant mental health support. And that's where we might think about possibly mental illness and getting professional support through mental health services. Mental health affects how we think, how we feel, how we react to stressful situations, how we relate to others, and handle stress and make decisions. So when to seek help? We get this question a lot. Some people might be going through something, but maybe might be a little bit reluctant to say that they're at the point where they need mental health support. So some of the things that it's helpful to think about in asking yourself if you or your child needs mental health services are considering the severity of your symptoms, how long they've occurred for, and the intensity and frequency. So if they're happening multiple times every day, they significantly affect one or more areas of your life, or the student's life, such as academic performance, social relationships, family relationships, and eating or sleeping habits. Then it might be time to access mental health services. At the point where it's a mental health crisis, we would see severe disruptive behavior, so violence and aggression, or self-injury, acute psychosis, so hearing or seeing things that are not there, thoughts of suicide or threats or actions to harm themselves or others. So those are things that indicate that a person is in a mental health crisis and needs immediate support. And we want to talk about suicide warning signs. So some things that we see that might indicate that a student or an individual is having some suicidal ideation or talking about wanting to die, talking about being a burden on somebody, saying things like people would be better off without me. Feelings that we might see might be emptiness or hopelessness, very sad and anxious, or sometimes full of rage, and unbearable emotional or physical pain. The things that we might see more so than the feelings are those behaviors. So changing behaviors, including making a plan or researching ways to die or researching other suicides, withdrawing, giving away things or making a will or writing letters to people, really taking those actions to kind of tie up things. Taking dangerous risks, significant mood swings, significant changes in eating or sleeping, or using drugs or alcohol. So those are all things that might be warning signs of suicide. And we'll talk about mental health resources that we have in the school building through PGCPS, but we also have access to the 988 number, which is a really great resource for immediate assistance, regardless of where the student is. So they can call 988 and have access to a counselor to receive that immediate support. So it's just always important to share that. And I encourage you all listening to share that to anyone that you think might be struggling, or anyone who might have a child who might be struggling. So just to spread that word and that accessibility to that resource. So resources that we have in the school building, we have school-based mental health professionals. Those include professional school counselors. School psychologists typically have more than one building, but we do have school psychologists in each of our schools. Mental health clinicians. We currently have about 168 schools that have mental health clinicians, and the plan for the next year is we will have a mental health clinician for each school in our district. So we are very excited to expand that work. We also have pupil personnel workers who are critical in providing access to that wraparound support and those community resources. And the school nurse is also critical in this as well. They can identify some of those somatic symptoms, those physical symptoms that come with mental health challenges, and be that first line of defense. So now we'll talk a little bit about social media. So social media refers to any website or applications that focus on communication with others. So they take in community-based input. They're allowing individuals to interact with each other through the app, share content such as memes, images, videos, and offer collaboration on different things. And then the broader umbrella under social media is screen time. So screen time refers to any time spent in front of a screen. So that can be social media, television, video games, FaceTime, and texting. But oftentimes we see that social media takes up the bulk of someone's screen time. And this relates to PGCPS. So students are allowed to have electronic devices such as phones while on school property or on school buses, but it is a violation in the code of conduct to use those devices in a manner that will disrupt the school environment. So yeah, you can't do TikTok dances in your math class, not appropriate, and that would be referred to the principal. So again, we do allow individuals to have those devices, but any disruption that teachers or staff see that it causes will be referred for appropriate disciplinary action. Okay, so these are some of the social media platforms, and I can actually, let's launch a quick poll here. So you should all see a poll. So what social media apps are your children using if you're a parent? Or if you're a student, you can fill it out for yourself. So we have YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter, and Discord. I'll give everyone a few more minutes, few more seconds. I see some responses rolling in. Okay. So yeah, so we can see YouTube is the most popular one, and that was consistent with the information that I found in researching this topic. Or a lot of our youth and adults are accessing YouTube more than any other social media channel. Then we have TikTok, Instagram, I see, Snapchat, Twitter, and then a little bit of Facebook. That kind of seems to be on the tail end for our youth. And then I also had asked you all to rate your level of concern with your child's social media use. So we have some that are not at all concerned, which is great. And then a majority are somewhat concerned. So yeah. Oh, I didn't share them. That would be helpful. There you are. So now you can all see those poll responses, and pretty consistent with the nationwide data as well. Thank you all for your input. So the screen time recommendations, so these are from the Center for Disease Control for children 2 to 5 years old. They recommend no more than 1 hour per day. So just 1 hour of screen time. And then for children 5 to 17 years old, we want no more than 2 hours per day. And that's not included homework. And so we also have the actual youth screen time rates. So 8 to 10 years old spend an average of 6 hours per day in front of a screen. 11 to 14, 9 hours. 15 to 18, 7.5 hours per day, and adults about 6.5 hours per day. So significantly higher than the recommendations from the CDC. A key thing to consider in social media use is brain development, particularly with our youth. So like Dr. Faison mentioned at the beginning, we are social creatures, right? We learn through connection and through social interaction. It's a very key piece in our development and our well-being as human beings. At the same time, adolescence is a time developmentally when teens crave those social rewards and acceptance. They want to be accepted by their peers, maybe want to fit in with a certain group, and youth get those happy hormones when they see social media activity that gives them that attention, those rewards. So that can trigger differences in the brain. Which it can be good. It can be very good in healthy doses. The other piece is the frontal lobe doesn't fully develop until an individual is 25. And that's important in particular for this topic is because the frontal lobe really regulates our ability to restrain impulses and self-monitor. So our frontal lobe tells us, I've been on TikTok for an hour. Maybe it's time to go do something else, or maybe I'm neglecting my other responsibilities. But with teens, that frontal lobe is not developed yet. So I'm sure you've seen as parents, sometimes you have to act as your child's frontal lobe. You have to give them reminders to do certain things. You have to maybe set those limits. And the same is true for social media as well. So in the research, there's different impacts, and different studies have shown different things. The issue is the technology is moving a lot faster than the research is moving. So I'm sure you saw in the poll a couple years ago, a lot of people would have been using Facebook, right? And as soon as we get the research showing the impacts of Facebook's no longer the platform that everybody's using. So that's an issue with the research that just lags. Good research takes a long time, and technology just moves faster, and apps move faster. So it's difficult to have that data. Another thing is, like I said, there's different impacts shown by different studies. And that really has told us that it kind of depends on the individual. It depends on how the individual is engaging in social media and what their different sensitivities are in terms of accessing social media. So for example, some studies have shown that individuals who use social media in a more interactive way, so they're actively posting, they're actively connecting with people, have maybe healthier mental health than those who are just kind of scrolling and looking at everyone else's posts, but not sharing themselves. So that's a consideration. Another consideration I think about in thinking about mental health, I think is helpful to think about it in a way that's consumption, right? So similar to if you eat something and your neighbor eats the same thing, it's going to affect you both differently, most likely. So just like different foods affect different bodies and different people differently, different kind of social media can affect us differently. Some people, especially our teens, are particularly sensitive to body image, right? And seeing others with maybe a body that's more favorable might be negatively affect them. So comparing themselves to others, some people are more prone to that. Some people are more prone to be significantly affected by bad news that they see in social media. So it really affects everyone differently. And I think the key is to help our students be mindful and to help our children and ourselves really be mindful of how what we're seeing and what we're consuming on social media is affecting us, and also how we're interacting with social media is affecting us. So some of the dangers of social media, we'll start with kind of the bad. Cyberbullying, that's the main concern. And I know we'll talk a little bit about this later, but just an important thing to note is significant concerns regarding racist content online. About 25% of young girls have seen racism on social media every day. And the really concerning thing about that online is a lot of times we're not talking about what we're seeing online. So sometimes people can see those concerning things and not have an outlet to share and process through that. So it's really kind of internalizing that. Also direct cyberbullying, LGBTQ plus students experience cyberbullying at significant rates online. So we'll talk about what to do if you suspect that your child is experiencing cyberbullying or if you're experiencing cyberbullying. Also feelings of inadequacy or comparing yourself to others or comparing themselves to others. I think a key piece to this also is social media allows us kind of that access to celebrities that hasn't been as readily available. It's always been, in the magazines and online, but right now with social media, it's in our feed kind of all the time. So comparing ourselves to people whom we might deem more successful than us or have a better physical appearance or things like that. So that's a danger as well. Can also cause sleep difficulties, particularly if used less than an hour before we're going to sleep. The blue light can activate our circadian rhythm and make it more difficult for us to fall asleep. And negative sleep habits can significantly affect teens. The teenage brain needs that sleep to do those skills such as self-regulate, remember information, and really just function. So sleep is especially critical in adolescence. Doom scrolling is a term that kind of came about during the pandemic. So really getting down that rabbit hole of bad news that just keeps popping up from our algorithm. So that's a danger as well. We tend to look for things that are validating our own thoughts. So if you're prone to anxiety, if you're prone to, you're having a hard time looking away from those bad news stories, those negative news stories, can kind of create an algorithm where we keep seeing that over and over again, which you can imagine is not healthy. We have also seen, unfortunately, the normalization of psychologically disordered behavior. So a huge concern on social media are accounts that post cutting, post self-injury, or anorexia or bulimia. And there are communities within social media that reinforce those behaviors, that give direct tips on how to hide disordered behaviors or self-injury behaviors. So that's a significant concern. Also, invasion of privacy. So you have access to pretty much anybody in the world via social media, and they might have access to our private information if we're not careful. And social media can also act as an echo chamber, really just reinforcing our own beliefs. And if we have those negative beliefs and those negative anxieties and things like that, kind of creating that echo chamber where that's all we see and we don't see any of the other outside pieces. So that's a significant concern, as well as obviously distraction. I'm sure we've all been somewhat distracted at some point related to social media and other priorities in our lives. So the positives. And I'm going to be brief with this because I know we have student panelists who can share more about this, but some of the positives of social media are that connection with friends and family. So again, actively using it, actively making those connections, posting with friends or to friends, joining or promoting a worthwhile cause. Online, there's ways that you can donate quickly online or share a cause that's important to you and really do some good via social media. Also, it's easy to seek or offer emotional support during difficult times, to check in with others. It's an easier way to do that than maybe picking up a phone and calling or going to someone's house. So it's a nice way to offer that emotional support very quickly. It's also it can be an outlet for creativity and self-expression. There's accounts for pretty much everything: drawing, music, pottery, painting, animals, law, really, there's niches for any kind of interest on social media. So that can be a way to foster that budding interest for our teenagers and our youth. So in terms of changing habits, so if we're concerned about social media and how often we or our children are using social media, it can be helpful to set measurable goals. So phones usually come and they'll give you a screen time report weekly, or you can look at it daily and see what the average use of screen time is, and the average amount of time that you're on a particular social media site, and set a goal for decreasing. Like, I want to decrease it by 30 minutes each week, and then setting a limit on the app that allows you to only use it for that amount of time, and also just really monitoring that progress. We can also do check-ins as a family, set goals together. My goal is going to be this. What's your goal going to be? And let's check back in a couple days. There's also focus apps that allow you to set limits on not only apps, but I know I use the app Forest. It allows you to kind of plant a tree and set a time limit. And so, for example, I'll plant a tree for an hour, and I won't be able to look at my phone for an hour, or else that tree will die. And I can designate the time as time that I'm spending on work, or time that I'm sleeping, or anything else. So it really helps you categorize what the priorities are. And then it combined with a tree planting organization. So you can trade in the coins that you earn with a planting a tree. So it sounds silly, but it's actually very effective. And it's one of the cheaper apps. I've researched a lot of these focus apps. That one's only $2 one time. A lot of them will have monthly subscriptions. And I know that that's just not practical for a lot of people, myself included. So the Forest app is one that I really like, but there's a bunch out there that you can check out. It's also helpful to talk to your kids about social media. So being open about your own interactions, like I said, setting a goal for yourself too, because they see us on our phones, they see us interacting with social media. So if we want to, be a model for them, we have to talk about our interactions and our experiences and our challenges with social media if we have them. We can also use open-ended prompts. So what have you seen lately on social media that has caught your attention, whether it's positive or negative? Have you seen anything that's been concerning or that has hurt you in any way? And I'm here to talk about that if that ever happens. So you're leaving it open-ended. You're letting them know that you're there for them. And you can also ask questions. Can you show me how you use Snapchat? Or can you show me how you use Locket? Tell me a little bit more about it. I just heard about it and I want to know if it's something that you're using, and I would like to know more about it. Also avoiding questions like, why are you on your phone so much? I know it's hard to avoid things like that, but that can cause children and really people to put up those walls, right? It's causing them to be a little bit defensive and attacked. So we want to avoid the, why are you on your phone so much? What are you doing on there? And really just come out at a point of curiosity and support. Okay, so now I will turn it over to Ms. Kimberly Robertson to talk about how we can keep our students safe online.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, I'm Kim Robertson, or Kimberly Robertson. I'm the Director of Technology Integration and Support for Prince George's County. So I'll just spend just a few minutes talking about ways that we as a district work to keep your students safe while they're online, and give you some of the practical tips that Emily just mentioned, some ways that you can do some research on your own. So we'll start first with ways that we try our best to keep your students safe while we're online. Of course, Emily shared some research around screen time and, of course, the effects of using social media, both for good and not so good. So we have conversations with our teachers around how to balance the use of technology in the classroom with offline and online activities. Internally, we have our network set up in what's called a walled garden, which essentially means that when your students are at school, they can only access resources or other @pgcps.org email addresses. So if there is web traffic coming in from out of the district, or email addresses that come in from out of the district, those can't be reached by your student's email account. Our teachers also use a tool called Hapara to monitor the activity that's taking place on their students' Chromebook, of course, by federal law. And because it's the right thing to do, we have a web filtering system set up that prevents particular traffic, particular adult traffic from reaching your students' Chromebooks. And of course, we teach our students digital citizenship. We're going to do a much better job as we move forward of teaching our students digital citizenship, but we do lessons and activities on digital citizenship all the time with our teachers. And then we also use Clever. If you've ever heard of Clever, it may be a point of frustration, but actually it's used to ensure that the applications that our teachers are using are actually approved for their use. So we are making sure we're having conversations with our teachers that if it's not in Clever, it's not necessarily approved for use. So those are some ways that we internally are working to make sure that while your students are online at school, that they are safe. And Emily has done a really good job of talking about cyberbullying as well. So I'm not going to talk too much about the data, but I will mention that cyberbullying has affected, I'm sure, adults, but our students over time. The positive thing that we can see here is that in the lower left-hand corner, you're able to see that more than half of our teenagers, our age 12 to 13-year-old students, actually try to help victims of cyberbullying. So that's a good thing. And we want to encourage our children to make sure that if they see something that just isn't right, what are ways that they can try to help? They can always talk to an adult. They can be a trusting ear for their friends or another student. They can talk to you and you can try to get them help. Because of course we know that our teenagers, sometimes they listen to each other a little bit better than they'll listen to us. So that's encouraging news, even though we recognize that there are statistics that show how our children and our students are impacted by cyberbullying. So I'm not going to talk about this screen too much at all because Emily has done a really good job of talking about some behavior patterns that you see. So you've heard those already, but don't be afraid to talk to your pediatrician. Don't be afraid to talk to your mental health counselor if you see that there are symptoms and signs that your student is acting differently than what you expect for them to act. Now, here are some ways that we want to consider you working to protect your students while they're online. Don't be afraid to think about setting up places in your home that are very public places for your students to use their computer. They don't have to use it in their room, right? So consider a place that's very public that you can see what's happening where they're expected to use it. I know it's difficult for me because I use my phone as my alarm, but at night, their phone doesn't have to be charged next to them on the nightstand. So that's something to think about. There are, as Emily mentioned, ways that you can manage their use of social media and their use of their phones. Different applications like Net Nanny or even Kid Logger, Google Family Link. These are all things, some are free, some are not, that will allow you to manage what is happening on your student's device. A very simple tip might be to log into your Wi-Fi and see if there's a way to manage the time that they spend. My children personally are old and out of the house, but at one point I used to turn off the Wi-Fi for their specific devices and pretend that I didn't know what happened, okay? That could be a trick that you could decide to use if you find that your students are really using it in ways that you find shouldn't be. Of course, we want to establish trusting relationships, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do. So think about ways to set up those parent controls if you need to. Don't be afraid to monitor what your students are doing. As Emily mentioned, ask questions. Ask their login if you need to, okay? Set up age restrictions for particular things. And I want to talk about that a little bit more by using a website that is invaluable to us as educators, but you'll find that it can be invaluable to you as well. So on the next slide, you'll see commonsensemedia.org. Please commit this to memory because it is a wonderful website that provides some practical strategies and tips for you. So I'm going to spend just a little bit of time talking through some of the resources that you can find. So you'll notice that at the very top, we're on the parent page. So if you were to go to commonsensemedia.org, it lands here. On the green bar across the top, you'll see movies, TV, books, etc. As Emily mentioned earlier, technology is moving faster than we can keep up. So perhaps you're curious about some of the games that you've heard your students play. If you go ahead and click on games for me, Emily, you'll notice that you can see the best game list. Go ahead and click on best game list. And as you scroll down on the screen, you'll notice some of the games that your students may play or that they may be interested in playing. A lot of times you can see reviews about these games. Let's go up to movies actually and talk about some of that. Actually, no, I want to go to apps. I'm sorry. Let's go to apps. Just because I heard Emily mention some social media applications, TikTok, so forth and so on. Notice that at the very top of the screen, you can choose the age of your child, and then you can choose devices that they have. And it actually will show you suggestions or recommendations for your student at that particular age range. So scroll down on the screen just a little bit. And you'll notice that it's giving you some suggestions. If you were to click on any one of them, it will show you an overview of that particular game and give you some tips and what ways that you can talk to your student about that particular resource. It also gives you a rating. So if you ever hear conversations around movies, podcasts, YouTube videos, use Common Sense Media as a way to help. I want to ask you to go to parent tips and FAQs as well. And this is where you can see it by platform. So some of those applications, so social media applications, if you have gamers in your household, I know you've heard of Discord, Roblox, and Fortnite. You might not know what they are, but Common Sense Media can give you more information about it. Hover back on parent tips and FAQs, and then over on the right where it says what's new, go down to family tech planners. This is a very practical plan that you can create with your child at home. So scrolling down on the screen, notice that you can pick an age group. So you can pick whatever age group you want. And this gives you a plan, a physical plan to show, oh, these things are correct for us to use in our household. That opens the door for you to have conversation with your child and open conversations about what in our household was safe. So just because, Johnny down the street is using XYZ, it doesn't mean that that's something that we have to use in our household. So think about this as a strategy and ways that you can open the door for conversations around technology. There are family planners, but I want to show you that Common Sense website has the resources that I just mentioned in Spanish as well. So scroll all the way down to the bottom of the screen. And in the middle, you'll notice the Latino program. If you were to click on that resource, it gives you essentially Latino-based media, games, things that may be important for your family. And if you were to scroll down and you have there's a place here, I think all the way at the bottom, if you scroll, Black voices, Native voices, LGBTQ+, Asian stories. So depending on your family and your family dynamic, there are other resources that you can find on this website specific to your family. So remember commonsensemedia.org. It is a wealth of resources. I can't remember where to find it right now, but there are family tips that if you sign up for with your phone, it will text you tips that you can just remind and have conversations with your student, okay, or with your child. So remember Common Sense Media as a wonderful resource. So click back over to the presentation. And so the key takeaways I'll mention is don't be afraid to have conversations with your student about what's expected for technology use, for social media use in your household. Talk to them about what's called their digital footprint. A lot of even seniors don't recognize that what they put online doesn't disappear. So the things that they're posting don't go away, and they're creating essentially their footprint that follows them. So help them make positive decisions at a younger age about what their footprint will be online. Make sure you monitor their activity. Don't forget that as a parent, even though it may be somewhat unfamiliar to us, ask questions, use common sense media if you need to help you with things that may be unfamiliar. If you, for whatever reason, find that there is some bullying, including cyberbullying, recognize that Prince George's County encourages you to report that with the website that you see. And this is a new place for our students and for our children. Even though they've grown up with technology at this point, they don't always know how to use it effectively without our support and with our help. So make sure that if you are having conversations around a mistake that was made online, lead with empathy, because there's always an opportunity for them to correct or adjust their behavior, especially once you've made some expectations. All right. So with that, I will turn it back over to Emily to take us to the next step.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. That was wonderful information. I know I personally learned a lot. So thank you for all that great information. So it is now time for our panel discussion. So we do have a couple of questions, but we encourage you all to submit any questions that you have and we can answer them. I'll let the panelists introduce themselves. Again, I'm Emily Pasco, the Mental Health Coordinator for PGCPS, and I will be moderating the panel. If we want to go in order, Dr. Faison be next.
Good afternoon. I'm Liz Faison, the Associate Superintendent of Student Services.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Doreen Hogans, and I serve as supervisor of the Office of School Counseling for PGCPS. Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Caroline Green. I'm a professional school counselor at Berwyn Heights Elementary School.
And good evening again. My name is Kim Robertson. I'm the Director of Technology Integration and Support for Prince George's County Public Schools. And I will introduce Michelle. I don't think that she has come into this group yet, but Michelle is in my department as an instructional technology specialist. And of course, she is a Prince George's County parent as well.
I'm Jordan Lamb. I am one of the vice presidents at Fairmont Heights High School.
Good evening. My name is Emmanuel Chinweze. I am a junior at Duval High School. I serve as the secretary at Duval High School and the upcoming first vice president of PGRAS.
Thank you so much. So for our students, I wanted to start off, first of all, by thanking you again publicly for helping us out and for providing the student perspective and the student voice in this important conversation. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what your experiences with social media have been, both positive and maybe negative. So what are some of the benefits that you've seen to your social media use?
Social media, for positives to start off, can have many benefits, such as promoting a business, like I said earlier, meeting people, but also meeting people you have to be careful because it's just a crazy world. Also, that students can find their interests. Many of us, you know, as we're growing up, we don't know what we like. We see influences, hopefully they're all positive, and we try to get a feel for what we like and who we are. Also, if you're someone who is in student advocacy, you can also use social media to run your campaign. I see a lot of people do it all the time. I think social media has really helped me get into student campaigning and representation in PGCPS. And as for a negative, it can really just be like guns and weapons. That's why, as said earlier, you also have to watch what your child is watching or looking at on social media. And I know through the pandemic, it was a lot of negative things about children, race, religion. It was just a lot going on in that moment. And a lot of people hide behind a screen to say meaningful things to children. And so that's why a lot of social medias have restrictions. You can block out certain words, you can block people. You can even set a timer on your child's phone for how long they're on social media.
Thank you so much, Jordan. Those are incredible points.
I definitely do agree with Jordan, and just to add on to a bit of what she said, some positive effects of social media, as we all know, you connect with people. Like she has said, you find new people to talk to, find interest. You connect with your environment. I know for myself, I can definitely say that connecting with people was a very important thing for me during the pandemic. I did go through a mental health crisis, and I didn't really have a lot around me to deal with what I had going on, depression, things of that nature. But I can definitely say social media had its positive impacts to that. I was able to connect with people, find things I love, find a caring environment, meet new people, make new relationships, build those relationships. And those relationships eventually led me into what I love doing, advocacy, like she said, being a student leader. When I build those relationships, I find a positive environment to be around, doing something I love. That will eventually even take me away from social media, because social media isn't everything, as we all know. So, the benefits of using social media is building those relationships, finding an environment you like, finding an environment that you can appreciate. There's also negatives as well. One thing I will definitely say is a huge negative is it is distracted from the real world. A lot of times we tend to be distracted from the things we see, from the likes. We compare ourselves to other people's likes, to other people's posts. We all need to realize that we are individual people. I used to think like that before, but I found my own interests outside of technology, outside of we need to understand we're living in the real world. And when we find things that distract us from looking at our phones, from looking at social media, we learn something new. We find a new hobby, find a new interest, and we won't feel bad about ourselves because we look at social media. So one thing I will say that is very negative is that it distracts us from the real world. But once you build those relationships and find something you love, you can take that into the real world with you, and social media won't be much of a distraction. A lot of people think that they have power on social media, but we are all our independent selves. And once you get used to that, once find an environment that you love, that is caring, you won't really think like that because you have your own circle, you have your own spot, and there's a lot of things you can do. You can block out. You have the power. Your phone is in your hands, so you have the power to block people. You have the power to remove things that you don't like. It's really up to you. But I just really can say that social media, it's really effective in both ways.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel. And I want to thank you also for sharing and being so open about your mental health difficulties. I know that that's not an easy thing to do, but I know that there are people on this call that now feel empowered to share their own story and their own challenges and to talk about that. So thank you so much. I admire that. And thank you so much for your important input for both sides, both how we can monitor our own feeds, right? And we have control of that and not letting the phone or social media control us. Very important. And I know, Jordan, I think you wanted to add something. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that as parents, you should encourage your children to create committees and clubs at their school so that they are off social media and can still find their interests and help other students find it as well.
Definitely encouraging that real life social interaction. Also very important. Thank you so much. Another key question that I wanted to ask, and again, please type in any questions that you'd like to have us answer, but I know we have Miss Caroline Green, who is an elementary school professional school counselor. So I was wondering, Miss Green, if you could share with us a little bit about the unique concerns that you're seeing with social media and with our younger students, and maybe share some tips or some insight around kind of the younger age group.
Yeah, thank you for having me. So I think the most significant concern we're facing is an exposure to sensitive and graphic content. So even in our elementary schools and early middle, often I have students who will come to me and share that they're seeing examples of hate speech or racism, sexism, graphic content like self-injury, inappropriate language, and that they're exposed to this online. And I think it's important to recognize that for adults, we have the skills to navigate social media safely, but for our kids, it's not as easy. Many kids, as Emily already spoke to, especially adolescent girls, are being bombarded with unrealistic beauty standards and maladaptive coping skills, such as cutting or disordered eating, by either a quick search or a suggested video. And I think it's just really important to realize that young kids who are on social media are being exposed to sensitive content and graphic imagery, and that this is a reality and not just a hypothetical. And to speak a little to how they're being exposed to it, I think it's important to note that students are seeing it whether they're searching for it or not. So while some students may have looked up self-injury behaviors with hashtags or search words that they're seeing on apps such as Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat or many of the ones in our polls, others are seeing content that's just based off suggested videos through algorithms on these popular apps, including YouTube. So much like our kids are very smart, so are the apps that they're using. A lot of these apps have pages that are For You pages, which show pre-selected videos and images that the computer thinks the viewer might be interested in, even if the viewer doesn't search for them. So your child might watch one of the suggested videos that contains sensitive material, and because they watch the video, the algorithm will suggest and provide more. To the adults on the call, you might use apps like TikTok and Instagram, and if you're like myself, you might see a lot of videos of baby ducks, which is great because then you see a lot of videos of baby ducks. But the same can be said for our younger kids, but with a much higher risk for harmful content. So I encourage families, much like we've discussed earlier in the conversation, to just be very mindful of the apps like Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, which have the For You page feature and continue to scroll. And also, when your child is using these types of apps, I really recommend being used in a common room where there's adult supervision, and to have an honest and open conversation with your child about social media content and how they can come to you if something doesn't feel right.
Thank you so much for that information and that insight and those tips. It's really helpful. Thank you. And I see Ms. Michelle Conti has joined the call. I was wondering if you maybe wanted to piggyback on that, because I know you have older students and you also have that kind of IT background. So if you want to answer any kind of tips about, teenagers and how parents can address social media use.
Sure. Good evening, and thank you. I apologize for my tardiness, but parents need to be aware of cyberbullying that their students may be dealing with. Adolescents are looking for friendship, they're social, they want to interact. So we got to be careful that they're not interacting negatively with their peers or with strangers. So be mindful of the different signs of cyberbullying. Making sure that our students are emotionally present, whether they're on their devices or not. And if they notice a difference in their kids, talk to their kids. Also consider having specific times when their kids can even go on social media. Maybe allow them to go on the weekend and monitor how long they're able to be on social media. If you want to make sure your kids aren't sneaking on their devices after hours, after mom and dad goes to bed, maybe consider turning off the Wi-Fi to their devices to ensure they're not able to sneak on and be on in the wee hours of the night, and thus affecting their sleep the next day or their rest, so they're not fully rested the next day for school in the morning. Those are just some quick tips in terms of parents just monitoring what their kids are doing on their phones, with social media to ensure they're always safe.
Thank you. I know we touched on cyberbullying. So my next question, I think that parents would benefit from here is, if we do suspect that our child or another individual is being cyberbullying, what steps can students or parents take to address that?
Oh, I was just going to add, a couple of years ago, our school system developed an online way for parents to report those incidences of bullying and cyberbullying. You can go to stopbullying.pgcps.org, and the paper report that we used to have is now electronic. You can also go to your Android device or to your iPhone, to the App Store, and PGCPS actually has a bullying app where you can download the app to your phone and make that report. The report, once you make the report online through the app or through the stopbullying.pgcps.org website, the information goes directly to the principal of the building. The principal does an investigation and then provides that information back to the parent around whether it is considered bullying or not bullying. However, if it is inappropriate behavior, whether it is bullying or not, the situation is handled by administration. This year, our state redefined bullying and cyberbullying and expanded the definition, as well as requires school systems to provide support, not only to the student who is being bullied, or we consider that student the targeted student, but also we are to provide support to the student who is conducting the acts of bullying and or cyberbullying. So the steps would be is to access the online report through stopbullying.pgcps.org, make your report, make a phone call to the principal in the school and to let them know what it is that you have seen, as well as the fact that you have made a report and that you are looking forward to the investigation and the outcome of what the investigation is. And then also continue to monitor the situation with your child on a daily basis. Do a temperature check to see how things are going, as well as keeping in frequent contact with the school to see what is occurring with the student, to ensure your student is receiving even the mental health supports that may be necessary, depending upon the severity of the acts of bullying and the impacts that your student has incurred as a result.
Thank you. And just to add on that, I know we talked about accessing mental health services in the schools and the various professionals that we have in PGCPS. But if you're having trouble accessing an individual or you just don't know where to start with finding mental health services for your child, you can email mentalhealth@pgcps.org. And I monitor that as well as a couple of other people on our team. So we will follow up and we will connect you to either a community resource or a school-based resource with your concern. So if you're having some challenges, obviously start with the school, see if the school team can support you. But if you're just not sure where to start or you're having trouble, that's a resource for you as well. We can help through that email. Thank you. I see that's in the chat. But yeah, any other questions that you all have, we'd be happy to answer, or any questions for our students. I'm also going to link the survey again. This is just, to tell us how we're doing and to tell us, what you'd like to hear about, what you'd like to see us addressed in any future Wellness Wednesdays. This is the last one for the school year, but we will discuss, over the summer, how we want to continue this work and to continue to get you all the important information on relevant topics as they relate to our children's health. So that is an effort that we fully plan on continuing. next year. So we value your input with that. So thank you for doing that survey. Another thing to note, as you, I'm sure, seen on Dr. Faison's background screen, is May is Mental Health Month. So we are celebrating Mental Health Month. It's an opportunity for us to open up the floor and to talk about mental health, to decrease that stigma around mental health and mental illness, and to really just hammer home the idea that everyone has mental health, everybody has challenges sometimes, and that there are resources available for you, both through PGCPS and through that 988 crisis number. You can also text HOME, HOME, to 741-741. We know our youth are sometimes more privy to texting than they are talking to somebody on the phone. So that's an option as well. And there's an option for Spanish. It's AYUDA, AYUDA, to the same number, 741-741. So that's the national crisis text line as well. So be sure to share those resources with other people that might benefit from them. We do have posters being sent to schools for Mental Health Month. Different school teams are doing different awareness campaigns. So make sure you ask your students what their school is doing to celebrate Mental Health Matters or Mental Health Awareness Month, and take that opportunity to talk to your children about mental health as well. And I do have a resource that I'll link in the chat for Mental Health Month in Maryland for some helpful resources. Okay. And I see a question in the chat. So someone asked, and I don't know who would be best to answer this, maybe an IT person or a counselor. What should parents do to help prevent students from chatting with strangers on Roblox or other games or social networks?
I'll jump out and say, in terms of Roblox, make sure your child creates an account using their correct age to ensure what they're able to see is age appropriate. And then consider building a list of age appropriate games. So maybe all the games on Roblox may not be appropriate depending on the age of the child. And then make sure the settings are set so that, you know, you're receiving communication, or you're able to block out people from being able to reach out to the child. Just some suggestions.
I also want to say that many of our students, our scholars, are equipped with headphones and earbuds and AirPods, I believe, the correct terminology for them. And if your child doesn't have like a centralized location where you can monitor what they are on, then you may want to limit the amount of headphones and AirPod usage that they have. So therefore you'll be able to hear what is happening on the devices and who they are interacting with. So I know it's we're very quick, especially if we're in the car, we want to listen to our music, and, and the children want to, be on their devices. But when that happens, we're not able to monitor and hear who they're talking to and what they are doing. So I would recommend that you limit the amount of AirPod and headphone usage. And, sometimes we may have to turn down your music in the car or your activity in the house to hear what they are doing.
And if I'm going to lift something that Jordan typed in chat and add on to the response. Jordan mentioned in chat to add the apps like Roblox to your phone with their accounts might work so that you're monitoring. But to elevate the monitoring piece, have discussions with your student. Again, they don't recognize this world as any different than what they've grown up in. So helping them understand why having these conversations with a stranger is really not appropriate may help them be more free to talk to you if for whatever reason they haven't updated the settings as Michelle mentioned, but it's opening the door for conversation. So when they feel that something is just inappropriate, they're more willing to come to you. But again, going back to what I said earlier, leading those conversations with empathy, because they'll need that in order to continue to have those conversations with you.
Thank you. Thank you, panelists, for your insight. I don't see any other questions rolling, and that's all that I had. So thank you all for joining us tonight. I hope that you learned something. And as I know Dr. Faison put in the chat, there will be a Mental Health Month memo coming out this month, as well as this presentation will be posted on the PGCPS YouTube page. And there's also links to previous presentations, Wellness Wednesday webinars. We've done webinars on student attendance, bullying, and student mental health in general. So be sure to check those out for additional information, as well as Wellness Wednesdays activities that are held in your child's school. So again, thank you all, and we look forward to continuing this work and to continuing to hear your input and really collaborate to support our students' mental health. So thank you all. Good night.